Lecture 8. So in this lecture, we're going to focus a little bit more on one of the more modern aspects of our tools that we have here. And so that's collaboration, the ways that we're able to work with other people in all of these different documents. And so it comes in handy when you're working on a group project, doing editing for somebody else, getting feedback from a professor. There's so many different circumstances where it's useful. And so there are a lot of tools that are involved in it that we're going to go over in this lecture that will hopefully make you a pro at being an effective collaborator. So our learning objective for this lesson is to use collaboration features. And so we'll look at them in Word and in Google Docs. You might be more familiar with them in Google Docs just because that kind of lends itself a little bit more to collaboration, but you can do pretty much all the same in Word. So collaboration, why do we do it? We need to. We live in an interactive human society. And so these tools will allow multiple people to work on the document at the same time or at different times, but still be able to see the work that their collaborators have done. And so some of the key tools that we're going to go over today are comments, suggestions and track changes, version history, and just real-time editing possibilities. So hopefully most of, if not all of these are already familiar to you. Comments, it's a little sticky note that you can add in there. People can have little conversations in them. Suggestions or track changes is where you can make edits, but still leave evidence of what was there before. Version history, I've talked about that a lot with emphasizing how you need to back up your material. So version history kind of falls in line with that. And then the real-time editing is just understanding what can be done in a document at the same time and how to use that effectively. Sometimes when you have too many people in a document, it can get a little bit crazy. So just kind of being aware of that and prepared for it for when you encounter it. So why do these tools matter? Communication, right? We need to be able to communicate with those that we're working with. So whether it's during school or in the workplace or even just for fun, right? Like my cousins, they're older than I thought that they would be still giving Christmas lists, but they give my aunt a Christmas list every year and they have it in a shared doc. And so they can edit it as they go, see updates. My aunt can put in questions and they can respond. So these aren't necessarily tools that you're only going to use when you're being kind of productive in a traditional sense. So it's kind of just great to kind of get into the habit of using them because they do make modern life so much easier. And so that goes along the same lines of efficiency, right? It's much easier than having to print out a document, hand it in, have written feedback, and then have to come and type all that up in your edits. Transparency, that's where track changes really comes in handy. You get to see what's been done. So it's not like you send your paper off, somebody edits it, and you can completely lose the intention or the meaning that you had there. If you disagree with one of the changes, you can just reverse it. So that's one of the great features. And then consistency, making sure everybody's working on the same document. So if you had one file and you mailed it out to everybody and everybody worked on it separately, you could end up with two completely different files. And then you have to kind of go back to the beginning to work from that. And so these tools eliminate that possibility for that essentially wasted time and effort. And so this is what it would look like if you want to add comments. I expect that this is probably what we're talking about today, probably the most familiar to everybody. So I have screenshots of just where you would go to do it in Word and in Google Docs. My screenshots mostly going forward are going to be from my computer, which is a Mac. So things might look a little bit different if you are working on a PC, but it'll generally be the same. So you go in and add a new comment. Once the comment pops up, there's an option for you to kind of reply to it, reserve or respond to it, resolve it, and so forth. And so they kind of just have like a running conversation along the side of your document, which is really nice to be able to kind of see what people's thoughts were originally and see if that gets resolved over time. Then in Google Docs, we have suggesting. I'll show you in a minute. Track changes, which is what we would have in Word. So Google Docs, this is up in the upper right-hand corner under where you would go to share the file. So you have the options. The default is editing. And so that's basically just like you're typing in a document as usual. There's no real tracking of anything. There's nothing special to it. With suggesting, you have the record of what was there originally, but then you also have whatever you're adding in there. So it makes the changes, the suggestions very clear to anybody coming in as a collaborator to see what you have added in. Then in Word, like I said, it's track changes. And so in the ribbon, you have a couple different tools that go along with it. So you can see track changes, you click that to turn it on or off. And then you have different levels of visibility essentially for what level of detail you're seeing with the changes. So you can have all markup, you can change it to no markup, so you can kind of switch back and forth between kind of the dirty, messy, edited or in process edited version and what it would look like if it was clean. And then you'll have all these different suggestions in there. And so like you can see an example here, and you can accept all of those in one go. You can accept them individually, or you can reject them. So it makes it really nice to go through piece by piece and see each piece of comment, each edit as you're moving through it to see what you want to keep, what you want to maybe change in a different way. So not the original, not the suggestion, but a third option. So this I have found just incredibly useful, even when I'm working on a document by myself. I sometimes think one thing and other times think another, or I'm not really sure. I can't commit to the changes that I think I might want to make. And so I can go in with track changes and I leave that there, get some work done, and then just let it sit for a minute, go do something else and come back to it later when I have maybe a clearer mind or I've had more time to think over it. So it's not only for collaboration, unless you want to think about collaboration with yourself, right? So you're collaborating with yourself using these tools as well. So it's not only for group projects or for work, it can really be useful for you in making sure that you're constructing the strongest documents possible. So track changes, like I said, they're very useful when you're working with others. It shows or can show your entire revision history. So down to like adding in a comma, it will track all of that for you. And the way that it shows on the screen, it highlights it, or the option is there for it to kind of be highlighted with a notation on the side. You could also have it where it's just a different colored text, which can maybe sometimes be a little bit harder to find yourself unless you're going through systematically and going change by change, which I would recommend doing. So like I mentioned, there are the options here with the markup that you see. I would say play around with that and see what you prefer. A lot of times within one project, you will switch back and forth between these multiple times just to kind of change the perspective and the way that you're able to take in the entire document and how it's all coming together. So you don't always want to have all of the different suggestions or edits in there. You want to see what it would look like if it's accepted. And so just ticking in the ribbon to turn off track changes doesn't mean that edits will disappear. So you have to really be attentive to this, make sure you're taking it all in. A lot of times comments and track changes will be used in the same document, and so they have different processes for resolving them. So this is one of those kind of personal preference things that you'll just have to get used to for figuring out how you would prefer to go through that in your documents. That kind of makes the most sense for your own personal workflow. But they're tools that you should definitely be used to incorporating. And then version history is essentially just like another saving grace, right? It's another backup for you. And so you can, in the different programs, access previous history, but also make sure that you're saving documents as you go, right? So you can have your almost like manually saved version history as well when you have your files where you have first draft, second draft, third draft, final. To access version history in Word, you would go to File, Info, and Version History. And then it'll give you the previous versions, but as read-only. And so you do have the option to restore them if you need to. If something goes wrong and you need to revert back to one of those earlier versions in Google Docs, File, Version History, and see Version History. And similar there, but the kind of added piece with that is that you can see who made the changes. So if you were kind of trying to interpret what one of your colleagues was doing, this would be a way to kind of go back in and see the changes they made to try to understand what their thought process was at that moment. And so this is screenshots just to kind of show you what it would look like. Pretty self-explanatory, I think. Something to play around with. Maybe when you're not even necessarily looking for version history, just go into the next paper that you write and look at this to see what it shows you, just to kind of get into the habit of knowing what those capabilities are. So our key takeaways for this lecture are that working collaboratively is incredibly easy now. But because of all the tools that we have to support it, it can also be incredibly complicated. So it's important that you understand all of these tools and what they can do, what you want them to do. And especially Google Docs, things are constantly changing. Things will move around within the program with different updates. So it's important that you're in the habit of kind of relying on them regularly, so you will be able to catch if there are any changes that are made and you're not kind of surprised when you get down to some really important group project and then everything's different than what I'm telling you right here. So version history is also there to kind of help you, but it's not infallible. It's not always going to catch everything. There's all kinds of glitches that could come up. So still, what I was talking about in previous lectures, make sure you're saving your files as well. Don't just accept that that's going to be a replacement for that, because it's not. And then when you're using track changes and comments, all of that, make sure they're all accepted, resolved, rejected before you're actually submitting the document anywhere. So we'll talk more in future lectures about kind of presenting the cleanest version at the end, but this is one of those things that it's always going to be better to make sure you're resolving it when you're finished. So if you've been collaborating with somebody and now you're working on the final draft, one of you should take the responsibility for creating that final, make sure everything is resolved, and then save it in whatever file format that you need.